Oranges. Which came first, the color orange or the fruit, the orange? This has been a very widely discussed question over the years by lots of people who don't know how to use Google. The answer is the fruit. The fruit came first. It seems pretty obvious to me that the fruit came first. There are lots of colors that are named after plants, and I have yet to see a fruit named after a color. I don't know why nobody ever asks this question about the color lime or the color violet, because they're in exactly the same situation. But everyone just cares about orange for some reason. Here at the Everything Review, we like to have a little fun, so we're going to start off today's episode with an icebreaker. I want you to tell me your favorite color. Say it out loud. It'll be like Dora the Explorer. Come on, even if you're in public, tell me. Wow! My favorite color is also the one you just said. What a coincidence! You know, choosing a color to be your favorite is actually very easy, because there's only 6 of them to choose from. I'm sure you can recite all of the colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. Roy G. B. All the colors of the rainbow. Now, there's also white and black, if you're racist, and there's also the DLC colors, like brown and pink and maroon, but those are just lighter and darker versions of the already existing colors, so they don't actually count. The history of these colors is quite fascinating too. Back in the 1950s, when the world stopped being black and white, the inventors of the time created the color wheel, with those 6 colors. So yes, those are the only colors there are. But back in Flintstones times, before the world was in black and white, they still had color. But they probably thought about color in a much different way than we do today. Hey, let me tell you a joke. Come closer. What's black, white, and red all over? Why, the cross-linguistic foundation of most common dedicated color words, of course. Modern languages have a lot of different words for colors. In English, we have the words blue and green, but a sizable quantity of languages just don't distinguish the two. Some Slavic languages actually have a 3-way distinction between blue and green. However, every language has a word for black and white, if you consider them synonyms for light and dark, that is. Now, black and white are colors technically, but the hue that's found in just about every language is red. Languages gain words for colors in a somewhat predictable manner, but they don't really lose them very often, and they always start out with black, white, and red. So if you think about it, those are the original 3 primary colors. But then came along 330 BC, and along with it came Aristotle. Probably. We don't know if it was actually him. Now, you see, probably Aristotle was a very scientific man, and he loved to use science to form scientific hypotheses. So he determined scientifically that color came from celestial rays, which were beamed down from the heavens by God. According to him, all of the hues come from different mixtures of white and black, which means they map out to not a color wheel, but a color line. His evidence for this, of course, is that in the daytime, it is light, and in the nighttime, it is dark. And now, you might have noticed that that explanation doesn't actually make any sense. However, nobody could think of anything better for about 20 more centuries. He also mapped out 4 of these colors to his weird Avatar: The Last Airbender set of elements: earth, air, water, and fire. They don't actually correspond to the colors that would make sense, though. He put fire in as white instead of red, and he put water as not blue or green, but yellow. The only logical conclusion of this that I can draw is that Aristotle believed that the ideal form of water was in piss, which really goes to show how ahead of his time he was. Excluding white and black, this 5-color system is actually exactly the same as our modern 6-color system, except for one missing party: orange. Orange, as a color, made some appearances over the years, but did not take hold in a widely publicized color model until 1704, with a book by a British philosopher and funny apple guy Isaac Newton. Now, most people just refer to this book as Optics, with a K, but I prefer to call it by its other name: A Treatise of the Reflections, Refractions, Inflections, and Colors of Light, also 2 treatises of the species and magnitude of curvilinear figures. It's a much more descriptive name, isn't it? Minus black and white, Newton's color model had 7 colors. Roy G. Biv. Now, I think Newton's model actually gets a bad rap nowadays. The common narrative, you see, is that Newton just took the standard 6-color system and added indigo to it because he was obsessed with number 7. But that's kind of misleading. I think it would be more accurate to say that he took the standard Aristotelian theory of colors and added indigo and orange to it, because he was obsessed with number 7. To be fair, it wasn't really him that was obsessed with number 7. He wanted to model the colors after music, which is already separately obsessed with the number 7, for music reasons. It's also important to note that this system had no primary colors. Red, yellow, and blue were just as primary as green, orange, violet, and indigo, which put it at odds with the painters at the time, who were already very accustomed to red, yellow, and blue. Newton's model was also very controversial at the time because it demonstrated that white was not the absence of colors, but could be broken up into a rainbow of colors using a prism. For the following century, a host of figures in the scientific community tried to twist Newton's model to have primary colors. They did like how Newton's model had actual evidence behind it, but they disliked its incompatibility with their preconceived notions. So, by the mid-18th century, indigo was out of use, and the general agreement was that red, yellow, and blue are the primaries, and orange, green, and violet are the secondaries. And it just hasn't changed since then. However, just because this color model has been widely used since the 1800s doesn't mean that people haven't come up with completely new color systems since then. Of course, there is the RGB color model, which is a different 6-color system using red, green, and blue as primaries. You might recognize this color palette as the computer's one, because most electronic screens use little pixels with those colors on them. Painters may be able to get by using just red, yellow, and blue, but if you tried to do that with a computer screen, you just wouldn't be able to show the color green. In the RGB color set, you still mix the 3 primary colors to get secondary colors, but it's a different set of secondary colors. Mixing red and green gets you yellow, which is just yellow. Mixing red and blue gets you magenta, which is basically just violet or purple. Mixing green and blue gets you cyan, or teal. I usually use the word teal interchangeably with the word cyan because they're essentially the same color, and people actually know how to pronounce the word teal. The RGB color model is also backed up by the biology of the human eye. You see, inside of your eyes, inside of your retinas, there are sets of rods and cones, which both deal with a different kind of light. The rods mainly just deal with lightness and darkness, but the cones exist in 3 types, each of which responds to a different wavelength of visible light. Something you're going to have to understand is that very often 2 colors with the same name are not actually the same color. The color that's called blue in the Newtonian color model would actually be much closer to cyan if it were in the RGB color model. Blue in the RGB color model would translate instead to indigo. So the 2 models really aren't that different. You could argue that they're the same, except the Newtonian model has orange. In addition, the green in the RYB color model is a lot darker than the one in the RGB color model. If the green of the RGB color model were in the RYB color model, it would probably be called lime, or light green. By the way, why did we choose limes to name the color lime after? Like, they're not even that close to the color lime. There are plenty of other plants that are more lime than actual limes. Limes aren't even lime. They're just green. Anyway, that's not even relevant. Going back to the cones in your eyes, the colors that activate them are actually shifted around in comparison to the RGB color model as well. I would show you what they are, but unfortunately that's not possible, because those colors are imaginary. You see, no single hue activates only one type of cone. The wavelengths always overlap with one or more of them, so showing a pure one is not possible. So there is the RGB color model, and there's the RYB color model, but there's also the opponent process theory, which deals more with the psychological aspect of perceiving color. That means it doesn't have any primaries, it doesn't have a wheel to be arranged in, it's just got 3 sets of opposites. So we've got red and green from the RYB spectrum, blue and yellow from the RGB spectrum, and black and white from the Pokemon franchise. The idea behind this theory is that if you look at a red thing and then close your eyes, the afterimage that shows up will be green. And the opposite is true if you look at a green thing, and same with all the other opposites. Although, I don't know if you knew this, but I've actually looked at a lot of red lights and then closed my eyes. It's actually a hobby of mine. I do it every Saturday with the boys, and the color that shows up looks pretty distinctly teal to me, not green. Now, it's possible that you noticed this already, but the entire screen is now covered in a blank homogeneous red slate. This is on purpose, and what you're probably going to want to do is turn up your brightness as far as it'll go if that's possible. I'm just going to need you to stare directly at your screen, and in a few seconds I'll change it to white, which won't work that well. White is a very bright color, if you hadn't noticed, but what will work much better is if you just close your eyes and look on the inside of your eyelids. So you should do that now. Close your eyes. I'm going to change the screen to white now, and you can tell me what color you're seeing. I'll give you a second to orient yourself. If it works, you should be seeing an after image, probably a square shape, of a very green or turquoise-ish color. Unless you're colorblind. And in that case, oops. This is pretty awkward, huh? Anyway, I'm gonna move on with the video now, so you can open your eyes. My face is on screen again. You look at me when I'm talking to you. Do you understand me? Anyway, the opponent process theory, as well as the RGB color model and the RYB color model are all accepted today, still. So if the opponent process theory is based on after images, you see, and the RGB primary colors are based on the physical cones in your eyes, what are the RYB primaries based on? Well, two things. First of all, no colors can be mixed to create those three colors, except for all of the colors that can be mixed to create those three colors, but also all other colors can be created by mixing only those three colors, except for all of the colors that cannot be created by only mixing those three colors. Okay, so to be fair, RYB is a subtractive color model, which means comparing it to something like the RGB color model is comparing apples to oranges. An additive color model only works with direct light, whereas a subtractive color model like RYB only works with indirect light, such as the light reflected off of paint. So RGB works best for lights on a computer screen or something, but if you're creating a picture, RYB works much better. The CMYK color model is exactly the same as the RGB color model, except it's in reverse. The secondary colors are the primary colors now. Also, there's black this time. The K stands for black. Printers usually use this one because it can print a much wider range of colors than red, yellow, and blue. But even if the RYB color system is just one subtractive color model among many, it's not like there's anything that actually makes it inferior in any way, right? For a subtractive color palette, mixing two colors will make the result darker. You can make it lighter again using white, of course, but that will make it lose saturation. So, ideally, the primary colors you choose should be as light and as saturated as possible. Blue isn't that, and it makes the whole half of the color wheel look a lot uglier than it needs to be. Now, that's really just my opinion. It's not any kind of objective criticism. But here's something that is. Warm and cool colors. A warm or cool color is just a color that's closer to the red end of the spectrum or the blue end of the spectrum. That's basically what they are. Some people give slightly different definitions, but I don't care. If you twist the spectrum into a circle, this still remains true, but it means that you should be able to put a line right through the middle of the spectrum where one side is warm and the other side is cool. The colors that are right on that line, that are halfway between red and blue, are neither warm or cool. The RGB color model lines up with this pretty well. Green and magenta both count as being on that line, so they're not warm or cool. This means that the spectrum has two colors that are warm, two colors that are cool, and two colors that are not. It's very balanced out. What's particularly nice is that the primary and secondary colors also contain one of each of those categories. So if you make your palette just one of those, it still lines up, it's still balanced. I wish I could say the same for RYB. First of all, we have to note that this violet and green are not the same as RGB's magenta and green. Most of the time they're much darker, and sometimes, on a very inconsistent basis, they're also shifted towards blue, which would put them under the cool category. So if you're considering all 6 of these colors, you could argue that it's still balanced. Unfortunately, I sure hope you never decide to use just the primary colors, something a very large and uncountable number of people have done, because red and yellow are both pretty uncontroversially warm. This looks gross. Please stop doing this. The overwhelming issue I have with this color model, though, is that people just consider red, orange, green, yellow, blue, and violet to be all of the colors. So every time they want to make something that's multicolored, I'm winking, but you can't tell because I'm wearing glasses, they just use those 6. This shows up in a very wide variety of things, including M&M's, Christmas lights, Mountain Dew flavors, the former Apple logo, the Macintosh loading thingy, the rainbow emoji, the Infinity Stones, Sonic colors for the Nintendo Wii, gay, many Crayola products, a My Little Pony character, the logo of Peacock TV, the Comcast logo, the flag of Bolivia. There are more, but I think you get the point. A standard LED screen can display 16,777,216 colors. But for some reason, everyone would just prefer to use 6 of those. Look, if you're running an ad in a newspaper or something and you have a limited ink choice, I understand. But most of the time you don't. It's the 21st century. Stop using an 18th century color palette. The crowning jewel of this system is orange, which by virtue of having secured a slot in the secondary colors club, has gained way more attention than it would for any other reason otherwise. You can yammer on to me all day about how orange is such a special and unique color that it deserves its own spot in the color wheel, but you will never convince me that red-orange is anywhere near as distinct from its neighbors as any of the other tertiary colors. It's also part of the Dutch national identity, and it's associated with Buddhism, so sorry to Buddhists for insulting your color. Not the Dutch though, they deserve it. After all that, this is still a review. What am I giving the color orange out of 10? Well, seeing an object or item that is the color orange genuinely fills me with palpable rage. So, probably not going to be giving it a very high number. Since the color orange is so closely tied to the color model it comes from, I think it's only fair to review it in comparison to the colors it goes alongside with. So red and blue are both much better than orange. They're classic colors, lots of people use them for lots of different things, and I'm giving them an 8 and 1/3 out of 10, respectively. Or not respectively, it doesn't actually matter. Green is another great color, and although it doesn't go well alongside other colors, it's still really good, so I'll give it a 7 and 4/5 out of 10. Violet and purple aren't found in nature very much, but I think they're both very underutilized, and they don't get as much credit as they should, so I'm giving them a 7 and 14/19 out of 10. Yellow isn't a bad color, but I think it only looks good in certain situations, and it's misused very frequently, so I'm giving it a 4 and 1/380th out of 10. Orange is like yellow, except it looks good in no situations. It looks ugly next to every other color, and I hate it. It deserves nothing more than a 1/10 out of 1. Which is just a 1 out of 10. It gets a 1 out of 10. Oranges as a fruit, though, are pretty nice. They deserve a solid 2,080/319ths. Oh, Anyway, it's the end of the video now. Could you tell that I filmed this at 4 different times of day? Probably not.